Meeting. Thanks for joining us today for our meeting. We do have a quorum with 4 of us here. Commissioner Benninga, who is our 5th member, is going to be absent today. So we will go ahead and take a look at our agenda. We just need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion by Karski and seconded by Sale. Let's take a vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, our agenda is ready to go. Anyone here for public input today? Man, what's that like? That's nice. No public input. We're going to move to the approval of the minutes, dated March 29. Any changes to be made to those? Or if not, I'll take a motion.
Move approval.
Second call.
All right, motion by Sale, seconded by Cole. Any discussion there? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, those pass. We'll move on to item 4, our financials for year-to-date of 2023. And I'll turn it over to you, Anna.
Anna Raker, Business Manager for Metro Communications. You have your financials for the period ending March 31st of 2023, and it's also up on the screen. So this is the first month where you're going to see 911 surcharges, but we'll start with our balance sheet. You'll notice that our cash is down as compared to last year, and this is truly reflective of we're starting to purchase FF&E for the new PSAP. And you see instead a rather large due from local government and due from state, which is referencing the funds that will be transferred to us as cash flow requires to fund that FF&E as agreed to between the city and the county, and then under our 911 coordination funds. You'll notice that the due from county right now is a negative 7364. That is accurate. What that reflects is that in for the last 2 months of 2022, which were received in January and February of this year, our surcharge revenue performed well, and it exceeded our estimated amounts. And we talked about that a little bit in recent meetings, that our surcharges are coming in very strong, which is good. We hope that that continues. As far as the rest of the balance sheet, I don't know if there's anything that is significant that you want to review. There are a lot of adjusting entries on here that reflect audit entries that aren't necessarily things that we write checks for, but they're required adjustments due to activity in our financial statements for the year ending 12/31/2022. So if you don't have any additional questions there, you can see the CIP is now $828,477 on line 9. That reflects additional amounts of assets that have been received but are not in service yet. So.
Just unpack the unreserved fund balance on line 34 again.
Sure.
It is, and is there pension dollars in there? And
so, no, the unreserved fund balance would be a reflection of, let me think about that a minute.
just
What line are we looking at?
34.
34, it's $1 million higher than last year. So
Yeah, so yes, I would say that that's going to reflect the due from state and local governments. So remember, we're getting $2.15 million through the city or county to fund those assets that we're purchasing. Plus we have close to $1 million that we're going to be getting through the state of South Dakota through the 911 Coordination Fund. So those due froms are reflected in there.
Got it.
And so that's where a significant amount of that's coming from. But that's a very good point, because it is a big change.
Got it. Thank you. Other balance sheet questions for Anna from anyone on the council? Okay. All right.
All right. So the next presentation we give you is the current year as compared to the prior year, and this is in a summary format. You can see that our 911 surcharges for January and February of this year are a little more than the surcharges received in January and February of last year. And that just reflects that we've seen an uptick in surcharges per month. I'll also point out to you that the city-county share is is significant. And what we did is we requested that the city advance us our support payments for April through June so that we could fund some large expenditures that were due in March. And they were kind enough, the city was kind enough to do that. And so that's why the city looks so much more than, or the city county share is so much greater. Okay. Services reflect things like our PSAP fees and EMS transfer fees, those types of things. Other revenue, this is your due from. So as we're paying for assets out of our cash that are going to be funded either through the coordination board or through the 2.15 that's flowing through the city and county, we're reflecting a due from in other revenue to balance it out. Scrolling down to personnel services, our personnel services are a little more than last year at this time. It's partially due to just step and COLA increases, but also staffing levels right now. So. And then looking at operating, repairs are less than last year. We're still negotiating Motorola agreement for this year. And that's tied to the changes that we're going to see in the new PSAP. So the team is working diligently on that, but that bill has not been received for the first quarter yet, and that's usually around $20,000. And then supplies are significantly more. Those are things like computers and monitors that we've been buying towards the new center. And so those flow through here because they're an operating expenditure rather than a capital outlay. The rest is fairly similar.
All right. Okay, questions on the year-to-date, current year comparison?
We're going to the third page?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, on the third page, this is comparing our budget versus actual year-to-date. See the annual budget over to the right. So you can see that we budgeted a little less in surcharges than what we've received year-to-date, and that's because when we budgeted, we weren't confident that we would see the revenue we've been experiencing in the last several months. And here you can really see the difference for the city and the county share. So the county has been paying us according to the monthly allocation where the city advanced us April, May, and June. But that'll write itself out in the coming months. You can see that our audio recordings, transfer fees, those are real comparable to what we've budgeted. And then you see the contribution of revenue, which again reflects assets that we've purchased that will be funded through contributions of revenue. Moving down to personnel, you can see a trend here in the first couple months of the year. Our salaries are a little less than budgeted. Overtime, obviously, more than budgeted. You know, we're still kind of in that scenario of, you know, trying to catch up with staff and get them on the floor out of training. You can see that our group health insurance is less than budgeted. As explained earlier, we fared very, very well. We didn't have any increases in our health insurance this year. We were able to extend them at the same amount as last year, so that was a good deal for us. And you'll see a savings at year end. Dropping down to operating, I'll point out again that under contracts, we're working on that Motorola contract, so there's about $20,000 there that has not been paid yet this year. We're waiting on that bill. And then when you look at rent, we're still waiting for our lease agreement from the county. So we have not paid rent to the county, but we've been in communication with them, and I know they're working on it. So that will, I'm sure, be righted in the coming months. And then the computer hardware under $5,000, that's $76,000. That's reflective of FF&E purchases. That would be not capital outlay, but small equipment, not in service yet. And everything else is, I guess, fairly status quo. Some of it's just the timing of when travel occurs, different things like that.
Mr. Mayor?
Questions? Yeah, Dean, go ahead.
Just curious, how's overtime trending? Has it been pretty consistent? Is it going up? Is it going down? So no trend line? That
It's improving, but it's
still get the fluctuations? Okay. Okay.
much like success is not always right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The other question I'd have on line 30 with maintenance contracts, is that like facility maintenance?
No, that's a great question. We just had this discussion with the city as we were going through the move to the new building. So, what you see in there is generally gonna be maintenance related to our equipment.
Got it.
Towers, software, a radio system, really tied to operating a PSAP.
Got it.
There could be there is some maintenance in there related to furniture. You know, lifts go out in the console, that type of thing. But the bulk of it is 911 PSAP related expenses.
Sure. Yeah, because I would assume we're probably limping along in a few areas, knowing that it's just going to be a backup soon. So it needs to be good enough for a backup, but not a Taj Mahal, right?
Yeah, and we did budget for knowing there would be some expenses later this year or next year as we make a transition to a backup center. You know, we're gonna be vacating space, we're gonna have some things that have to be moved and different things that need to be dealt with. And so we do have funds set aside for that later in the year.
Okay. Other questions on the current versus actual for the year-to-date there? All right. All right. Any other financial presentation on that front?
I would request a motion, if you're so inclined, to approve the financials as presented.
Sounds good. Look for a motion.
So move, Cole.
Second.
All right, motion by Cole and seconded by Karski to approve the financials as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that's going to pass. And we'll move on to the audited 2022 report.
So we received approval from Department of Legislative Audit for our financials as presented to them. So these are our audited financials, and council members, Metro Management Council members, you have full copies of those. I did not, because they're over 40 pages long, I didn't make copies for everyone in the audience, but they are out on the web, so you can pull them off there. And if anybody would like a copy, you just need to let me know, and I'll make sure you get a paper copy. We did receive a favorable audit determination, and just a reminder that we're a component unit of the city of Sioux Falls, so we work hard to get our audit done so that the numbers can be reported also under the city's numbers, and they can present their audit timely also. And I will also send this to you electronically. But included in here, you'll see on the independent auditor's report that they find the financial statements to be a fair representation of our financials.
All right. Sorry, it's 40 pages, so we're just looking at a couple things here. All right. Discussion or questions on the Eid Bailey audit? Yeah, Council Commissioner Karski.
Are you audited by any state agencies, or is it just the independent audit?
By Eid Bailey, yeah, just
Okay,
Eid
so
Bailey.
not Department of Legislative Audit or anything?
They do receive a copy. First of all, we have to submit a letter, the engagement letter that the mayor signs based on your approval to request that Eid Bailey perform our audit. Once they receive that, they review it and provide authorization for them to complete our year-end audit. And then once the audit is complete, the auditor, Eid Bailey, sends the completed audit report to Department of Legislative Audit, and then they review it and put their stamp of approval. And if they have any findings, they could send it back and request edits, but they did not have any findings this year. They accepted it as presented.
That was my second question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions on the audit?
Were there any concerns that
the auditors brought forward?
No, the biggest task we had this year that was most challenging is implementation of GASB 87, which is a new reporting requirement related to leases. So any tower leases, mostly for us it's tower leases, but they also looked at like our lease for facilities, that kind of thing. And it required additional services and additional time, and the city was incredibly helpful with that process. But no concerns. Eide Bailly performed those services for us and provided additional services in order to gather the information and review all of the agreements. We had to present all agreements that surrounded our leases so they could review those in detail and report them accurately.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, not seeing or hearing any others, look for a motion to accept the
Move to accept.
audited 2020.
Second call.
All right, motion by Sale, seconded by Cole. Any discussion there? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that is accepted. I'll move on to interim director's report, Mr. Gramlich.
Let me get set up here quick, if you don't mind.
You bet, no problem.
Well, if my math doesn't fail me, today marks 5 weeks. Honestly, been a lot of fun. As you would imagine, since the 2 weeks ago when we met, there hasn't been a whole lot of change, but I do want to give you just a little bit more, a little deeper glimpse into some of the things that we've been working on. You'll see me use this same format throughout. That's what I intend to do for you. If you'd like it to change, you'll let me know, yeah? So we are still focused, as you would imagine, on operational readiness. I want to make sure that we can provide the services that we intended to provide to our customers. When we look at the transition of IT services to the city, that is now in process. We have most of that already in swing, building the large plan to get it over. I anticipate that that will go quickly and fairly easily from what I've gotten from both teams. Great coordination between the county services and the city IT, and I'm excited to see what that looks like for us when we're completed. As I mentioned before, update of the COOP. We'll be using Sandy Frentz. Those meetings are being set now. She'll be sitting down with our operations team and the bulk of our leadership team and updating that continuity plan so that we're prepared in the event we have any concerns there.
When you say update it, what's it look like now? Like when was it put in place and?
It's been a little while. There's some differences. Mostly it's up to date, which is good. There's some differences in the way that that format works versus what most of our partners are used to working at. So Sandy's going to help us kind of put that in the format that everyone reads and understands. At the same time, she'll just bring a couple of additional lenses to that team to help them build it even more in depth. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Specifically focusing on exactly who is identified in the event of this or that. That's one of the big strategies that we want to make sure we get. Rather than a division or an area, these are the people that fall into those roles. So Sandy has done some pretty amazing work if you're familiar with it across the city. I'm just excited to be able to have her as a resource. So she plans to get going over the next 3 weeks. The meetings come, and then we'll be finalizing that, I would expect, sometime in probably early June.
Okay.
Good. Lastly, support for transition to the new PC. As you can imagine, with the resources that we have, it's a big move. You don't just flip one switch on and another switch off. We were able to coordinate with Erin Bovenkamp from the city, a project manager. She sat down with this team on multiple occasions. Now we facilitated those meetings, and those transition plans are getting molded into the main transition plan so that we are making sure that we're not missing any overlaps, or frankly underlaps is probably what I'm most concerned about. So pleased with our process there, especially in 2 weeks. We've come a long way. We'll be looking forward to more as we keep moving forward. There's a lot to look at as we move toward that transition sometime in this fall. Any questions on that?
What is you said sometime this fall, do we kind of know?
Kind of moves around, but I'm here in October is fair enough to say.
October?
So we start quite a bit of our move in earlier. Mid-summer would be a fair statement. They'll start getting the tech set up, getting that move in, and then we'll be moving in the fall.
So will that literally be a situation where like shift 1 ends here and then shift 2
It's most likely, yeah. So oversimplifying it, but yeah, the easiest way to operationalize it out is that one shift potentially will stay late to ensure that we have that overlap and transition in case when we do flip the switch on at the new facility, it doesn't function the way we intend. But once we are comfortable it is working, then that shift would go home and we just never go back to that unless it's a backup.
Got it.
So it sounds simple. You can imagine the depth of coordination. So to have the services of Erin are phenomenal. She's really good at asking questions that might either be in your head or on a napkin. And I don't mean that disparagingly, it's just difficult to keep it all coordinated. She does that well. I'm gonna hit this a lot of times, just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Good there, any other questions? Okay. The next one is always going to be top of mind for the time being, because until we get past it, it's gonna be difficult to think about anything else. For us in the medical world, ABCs. If my airway isn't open, I don't care about anything else. It's similar here with staffing. If we can't figure out how to get ahead of the retention, we're gonna have difficulty implementing any of the other improvements that we'd like to do. So to that point, evaluation of processes obviously will continue ongoing. We're looking from recruiting to hiring to training, all of that. Pat, we talked about this briefly last time. That's the partner agency training program. That's colloquially taking firefighters and or cops, moving them over and seeing if they can function as dispatchers to increase that ability for us to have that backup. We have one Pat, that's what we're calling him. He's technically Pat the second since they're giving me looks. They have dubbed me Pat the first, if you were wondering. So we're now looking at Pat the third to start this coming Monday. And it gives us two really diverse looks at potential candidates. We have our first, I guess our second Pat. He had a background in law enforcement and dispatch, so he was a pretty quick study. We have the opportunity to bring in a younger person who doesn't have that experience, and we're really excited to see if our hiring processes are similar enough that they have the skills and abilities necessary to provide backup to this group. So I'll keep you updated on that program as it goes on. We'll continue to look for different opportunities to bring other partners in, but for right now, it's going really well. Everyone tells me they like Pat the second, so not so much Pat the first, but Pat the second.
So that's just, those roles, tell me, like, are they long-term roles? Are they just temporary roles? Are they permanent backups? Like,
yeah, so
unpack that.
I think I don't have that answer, so it'll be fun for me to answer it. We have a couple different ways that we're looking at it. So this is an opportunity that presented itself. I think I talked about it a little bit last time. We had an injury of a cadet firefighter. Historically, that would have caused us a difficulty in being able to retain them as a city employee. So in this instance, we went through an interactive ADA process. We're able to identify that because, oddly enough, Division Chief Gramlich happens to be over at Metro, we could try this. Long term, if you're asking what my vision is, I would like to see that turn into like a certification or a specialty for our folks so that we have the ability to maintain that certification and they're available in the event that we need them. It's not meant to be additional employees or to compete with current employees. It just helps us build that bench, so to speak, in the event that we need it.
Got it.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, recruitment partnerships, just letting you know some things that we were able to take advantage of. These were just opportunities of convenience. We had a public safety showcase through the city. It wasn't hard to do. Metro jumped on board and we were able to participate in that. We'll continue to look for opportunities to leverage that relationship with public safety across the board to figure out how we can help each other in our recruiting efforts. Oftentimes we do attract candidates that may or may not be a great fit for the individual agency, but other agencies they might be a fit for, especially if they have a heart for service. So we're looking for ways to cascade those candidates from agency to agency in the event that they're unsuccessful at the one that they originally came in for. I'm pretty excited for that partnership. It's always existed. I'm just excited to really take it to the next level. Good? I know you remember this slide. This is the one I brought up yesterday, and I'll explain why I'm showing it to you again. The 24% retention rate obviously is going to continue to stay top of mind. The 70% availability goes to your question earlier, Commissioner Karski. So right now we're sitting at 70% of our staff are fully trained and available to operate. So what that means is that on this graph, there's two things I want you to see. The first is the blue line. You don't have to dig so deep into the details. I made it really big and really colorful so it helps. The blue line represents a new model of training that Metro has put into place. In past years, they would have simply brought in a class. They would have stayed for 26 weeks. They would have finished their training and then they are now available, assuming they're all successful in their training, they're now available to man the consoles. In this time, because they've had such shortages, the staff that's on the floor starts to get worn out. So what we're doing here is they get them partially trained on one of the disciplines within Metro's command. Then they come back out onto the floor. They'll function for a few weeks to a few months, depending on how the schedule works. At a certain time, they'll come back into training. They'll learn the next phase. And as you can see, that's why we get this stair step toward the right. Our goal at the end of that graph, December 25th, we end up at, for all intents and purposes, our actual full staffing. Now, what I want you to see is the red. The red is what happens if we stay on our current path for retention. And that illustrates very clearly why it's difficult for us to ever get ahead. So when I keep saying that staffing will stay at front of mind, that's why. Right now, all we have to do is focus on keeping the people we have. We're getting good candidates, we're getting them through training, we just need to retain them. And that we've talked about how the first year is the danger zone, but really it goes all the way to the 6th year, 5th through 5 years. So we're focusing on all the different levers that we can push. Obviously, moving into the new facility will be a big one that we can add, but there's a lot more that we'll address as we continue to move forward.
If I may, I'm just wanting to make sure I understand. So the old way was you're trained completely on everything and then you go on the floor.
Correct.
And that took,
26 weeks.
okay, 6 months. So the new way is you're going to be trained on this console and you're going to learn it. And you're going to be good at it. Then we'll bring you back for training. I would think that would shorten the second training time because all of a sudden you have a familiarity with what's going on. I mean, this makes a lot of sense to me. I was just wanting to make sure I fully understood it.
I think you do. I think one of the things that we'd have to be careful not to assume is that as you move from console to console, while you do understand how to operate the equipment, we'll just say the technology, the processes are significantly different. Does that make sense?
It does.
It
but
still shows an improvement. I would agree with you that it would be difficult. I don't think that we're there yet, but it's a thing that we're watching. Because obviously training time, just like for all of our public safety partners, is a big deal. You get them on the books, you get them hired, but they're not, in essence, contributing to your mission until you can get them certified. This is a really, honestly, this is one of the most innovative things as I've gone through it. I really found this to be an innovative solution to a problem that they didn't have a lot of resources to fix.
I agree.
So, and what it is it's kind of it is a stair step, but even metaphorically it is. There's some relief that comes to the floor and then it comes back. So our goal is to get to that top and then maintain that as best as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Fair? Any questions on that one? You had it look like maybe you were gonna. The last one is a little more in-depth look. This is something I'm pretty good at pulling out the things that should be eye-popping, and I wanted you to see this. So we went through the hours that were extra, worked in the year 2022. So for Metro, there were roughly 9,000 extra hours that had to be worked due to vacancies. Interestingly enough, if I take that and I apply it across the folks that were available to fill those spots, which are both salaried and hourly employees, it came out to 4.5 weeks on average for every single employee in that building over a month.
Over the course of a year.
Over the course of a year, they worked an additional 1.5 months a week, every single person. That's not a statistic I'm usually putting out. When I got to that, I knew that would be impactful for you. So that when we talk about the effects of burnout, working an additional month and then some per employee across the entirety of the group, that is substantial. And interestingly enough, it affects the entire organization because both our salaried employees and our floor staff were running at a similar rate, meaning the number of hours that each group worked in relation to how many there were. And then you just think about all of that work is pushed to somewhere else. Because every time we have a salaried person on a console, then that job isn't able to get addressed then. When we have our floor staff working there, they're exhausted for all of the remaining shifts. This is an important thing to take into account, and it just really speaks to the criticality of us addressing the staffing.
What do you feel, based on 5 weeks, has led to 24% retention over time? What will fix this?
So at the risk of sounding trite, 7,213 things. It's been death by 1,000 paper cuts. You could point to the facility, or you could point to the difficulty of the job, or you could point to any number of things. They simply don't have the resources to address those things. When we look at the way we manage and whether we're looking at cultural impact, all of these things, it's just difficult when you're always trying to keep your head above water. We won't fix it overnight. It's not an overnight fix. We'll start pulling levers. We'll start working on the things that are easy, because there are some things that are low-hanging fruit. Some things will require investment, not just economic. They'll require investment of attitude. They will require investment of support. I do think that it can be turned around, but it's going to take a lot of support and resources, and you can see that. I'll take every opportunity I can when I'm at the mic to make sure that I'm clear. I just marvel at the fact that this mission has still been completed day after day after day, and these are the types of statistics that I bring to you. It is a Herculean effort by an extraordinary team.
Yeah, that's a crazy stat, 4.5 weeks extra annually per employee.
I want you to know how many times I redid the math because
Yeah.
I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
I did not. I thought for sure I had done that wrong. So I hope you find value in that.
Yeah.
Next step should be pretty easy for us. Budget, luckily, is the next item on the agenda. I'll explain that when I get it. Contract negotiations start tomorrow, and the facility move, as I mentioned, is midsummer through fall of 2023. Those are all things that all of that I'm excited for. I'm excited to be able to work with our team over there in contract negotiations. I think they'll smile similarly because it should be a fun time. And I'm confident that we're going to come to some great things. So I look forward to that.
If this is just back to that last discussion though about staffing and 7,000 things and whatever.
Yeah.
Well, all that being said, what are 2 to 3 things that will have the biggest impact? Is it the facility? Is it the structure? Is it the leadership? Is it the hours?
If you want me to put them into 3, unification of resources, it would be the facility will be a huge one, and then it is just simply additional capacity to do the things that need to be done. That could be, and I've explained this before, using their frontline supervisor explanation. Those are operational people, so they don't have space to lead and to do leadership stuff. Same thing at the top. Most of our executive team is burned up with the tasks of the day. To use the city's vernacular of EOS and traction, it is all sand all the time. There is no chance you could fit a rock in any bottle in that whole place. So those types of things, very simply put.
What do you mean by unification of resources? Your first thing you said.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. We work through this. I've had an enormous amount of support. As you'll see coming up in the finance presentation, City Finance jumped in and helped me with that. Between Drew and Carrie, I've had enormous amounts of support working through things. What we find is that we have to jump from one perspective to another. We have to figure out how to align those. It is one of the most difficult challenges that I've ever encountered, and this is where I live. I live in these types of services. It's a significant challenge. It burns a significant amount of time and effort across the teams. I would very much recommend that for this organization, we have the ability to have a unification of that. So one employee perspective, one way that we're going to manage employees, whether it's the city's employer of choice, whether it's whatever, these things, we're in 2 different worlds, and constantly we find ourselves straddling as the boats either move farther away or closer together, and it's very difficult to do. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay, other questions for Mike on his report? All right, thanks, man.
I got one more. I got to get through the budget for you. So this is not going to look like what you're accustomed to, so I'm going to apologize in advance. Obviously, when I talk about the 5 weeks, it's been fast-paced. So we are trying our best to keep up with all of the expectations, both county and city for deadline. The city's finance team helped me extensively. What I'm presenting to you today are the highlights. I'm being direct. I don't have information to answer really in-depth stuff. We'll get you a full budget. We'll answer anything that needs to be done today. Just want to make you apprised of what's going on. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay.
And we talked about that at our last meeting, since this one was so close from the last one.
Right. So I just want to set the expectation so that I don't feel like I failed. This is the format that we use. I'm familiar with it, so I'm using it because it's familiar for me. We talk about our purpose. Obviously, we're the first link between the public and responders. You know the value of public safety. I don't think I have to sell anyone here on that. As we work through, our focus is to ensure excellence, service excellence through collaboration with partner agencies, talking through the Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office, Sioux Falls Police, Fire, Patient Care EMS, and we have several other partner agencies as well. We're focused on a successful transition to the new PSAP. As you can imagine, that's taken a bunch of our bandwidth up as well. And then in the end, the only thing we're here for is to ensure that we have continuity of service. So we'll be focusing on hiring and retention and redundancy in our systems. Our people, currently 53 full-time in terms of an authorized perspective team. They are committed, multifaceted. They're influencers, which is a different word that you might not have expected to see. And the point of that is that our folks are the first line. They set the tone for the call and oftentimes have a huge impact on the success of the overall response. It's just a fact that's usually overlooked in the way that dispatchers work. I find it really, I'm enjoying being able to watch them do their job and understanding how I've been on the other end of it, and I can really see how they have a huge impact on what happens when we get on scene. The expectations of a dispatcher are high. It is demanding work. I can tell you that firsthand. I'm watching it. It's extraordinary to me to watch what they do. Staffing, we've talked about it at length. Additional shift loads. Years of service is interesting. We currently have about half of our folks are 5 years or less. We have some folks in the middle and then some folks that are over that 20. That's a tough succession plan. We got to make sure that we can retain some folks and keep them through and then start building our next crop of leaders as well. So whenever you have these retention problems, you also have these types of demographic problems. So I'm aware of them. We'll be addressing them directly and doing our best to try to fill that middle. I thought you might enjoy this. We answer over 400,000 calls annually. I was able to get our civic analytics team to put together this graphic. It represents the calls over the 2008 to 2023 time period. And I'll click it and you'll be able to watch that grow. As it gets darker, that means there are more calls. You'll see as we progress through the tens, it probably isn't surprising to you where the calls end up. And as you can see, it just continues to get more dense, and then the dense center expands. My deputy is very visual, so we worked on this together because it's a great way to show people something visually that you might understand just me explaining it, but when you see it, it's a big change. You can see how that density increases and it expands quite a lot. Fair? Mm-hmm. All right, really quick cost of services. This is our expenses. We've broken it up into personnel and operations. So for personnel, we have a $301,000 increase or 5.6%. We are not asking currently for any additional FTEs. The 5.6 includes wages and health insurance, and I'll explain that. So first and foremost, wages. Obviously, we have to bargain in good faith, so we've put a placeholder in with the process that's here. Obviously, we work that through on the end, but it is reflected in there in terms of a percentage. Health insurance, it's likely, if we meet our goals, that we will move from a small employer to a mid-size employer. And with that comes a roughly 15% increase in our health insurance. So we've reflected in this so you know that it's coming. As we move to operations, that's the one that might catch your eye. What I can explain quickly and easily is that even though it is a 350 or a 56.8 increase, really the bulk of that are things that we've already identified as part of the PSC. So a big chunk of it comes to repair and maintenance. So our service agreements with our radio companies, we took a large increase over the next year or for the next year. It's a fairly typical makeup from COVID times. We see that happening. We don't have a lot to do with it. There's really no other players in the space. So we took a big hit there. Additionally, as we move into the new center, there are new agreements that we're putting in place. If you add on to that, it's put into this budget, but it won't be reflected properly. So as we expand the simulcast system for all of our partners, both county and city, which is definitively a phenomenal program, it provides us capable radio response in all of the areas that we would respond to. This adds an additional maintenance agreement. It will likely not be fully or even at all experienced in 2024, depending on when the actual in-service date goes and then when a warranty expires. But I want that to be laid out so that you can see what's coming for all of us. As we improve the system for all of our responders, of course, there's a cost associated with it, and that's where it would live. Most likely in 2024, depending on our installation time, if we're able to get it in 2023 and there is a year warranty, we would experience very little to no cost in 2024. But then at the expiration date of the warranty, we would have that maintenance agreement just like we do currently for our existing simulcast system. Any questions on that one? The other part of that increase is the new PSAP, and that is as simple as a difference in the lease price. So as we move from the county facility to the new facility, there's an increase there. That is all captured in that 350. There's a few other one-offs. I mean, we're talking thousands, not tens of thousands or 20s of thousands, but that is where the bulk of it is. So I wanted to make sure and identify that.
What will be the difference in our lease price annually?
85, I believe. Hold on. I have that. Just so we're clear, it's a tentative lease right now. Obviously, that hasn't been agreed upon, but we had to put in a placeholder so that we could plan. The difference is $84,000 annually.
Annually?
Yeah.
And how will that work with the backup and the leasing of the backup?
We'll still have that.
Okay, so that lease will remain. We're taking on an additional lease.
That is correct.
Okay. And that lease will remain with the backup at its same cost.
No, that's,
Okay. It'll be lessened because it's just sitting there as a shell.
we don't have that done yet, correct? Do we have that done, I should have said? We have an estimate. What is
Okay.
that? Can you help me with it? 25,000.
25,000 a year?
Yeah.
Okay,
Which is a little less than half.
Yeah, because it was roughly about 50.
got it. Okay.
That work?
Yeah, great. Other questions on that? Okay, thanks.
Real quick, if you want to see that operating support, this just shows you where it comes from. 2.8 comes from the surcharge revenues. We have about $500,000 in other revenues. The rest is split between the city and the use of reserves. Given the fact that we're currently reusing reserves, really the last thing I have to share with you is just forecasting. This was working on it with finance. They wanted to make sure we saw the forecasting of our cash balance. If we continue at our current 8% increase year on year, that is where our forecasting cash balance will end. So I just want you to be aware of that.
8% increase year. What is that number?
So that's usually what we do is an 8% increase year on year, and that keeps us ahead.
That's historically been our budget increases of 8% overall.
Help me with that so that I don't misspeak.
Our increases have been kind of all over.
Okay.
Early on when we became independent, the goal was 4 to 6%. Some of you may remember. But we had some years where we did $0 increases, based on just where we were at or what the city or county had going on. You had a 25% increase a few years ago.
Right.
And then you had a 15% this year. And so the 8% stabilizes a bit, but that's what's going to be required just to maintain a very minimum cash flow when you get into 29 and 30.
So the previous slide, Mike, has, okay, 11.4% increase. Okay,
So the 8% is what this graph is built on. So
Right.
even with an 8% increase year on year, we lose ground.
Could I get you to roll that back
Yeah.
one more time?
Please, yeah.
The unfunded expense is 8% for both city and county. Let's talk about the 911 surcharge revenues. My understanding is based on population and people in areas. Are you factoring any increase in that, or is that the static number?
We left it at 1.25. You're going to ask a question that I don't have great answers to yet. I'm still trying to get my hands around it. But what I understand so far is that we struggle to capture that population growth directly into that surcharge. So oversimplifying, and you'll correct me, right? Good, that's what I need. As we have somebody move, let's say from Texas into South Dakota, they oftentimes keep their number. We then don't capture that surcharge. And that consistently happens to us. So it is dangerous to think that you're just grabbing a population increase and then get the corresponding surcharge increase, because it does not work that way. Is that a good answer?
It was probably the correct answer. It's not a good answer. The good answer would be, yes, we're capturing all of the
Yeah.
new people, but I
That's-
understand it and
Yeah.
appreciate that.
We're just the ones who cash the check. So we need some help in how you want to collect it. Is that fair?
Question. Do we have after so many years, I know kind of the goal was to spend down our, what may have been deemed excessive cash reserves, but I mean, are we kind of putting a floor on that? Do we have a target?
Yep. 500,000 is where we start having difficulty with our cash flow. So
Okay.
you can see that on the chart. That's basically 2027.
Okay.
And that means we would have to have infusions just to make our different debts. And that was one of the main reasons we have this, is to be able to even out that cash flow. So at 500,000, we start to run into difficulty.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Other questions? Good questions. All right.
That's a thank you for our new center up there.
Yeah, it looks great. Doesn't look like that yet. So this was the presentation. Will we have a formal adoption of this at a future meeting?
I would say yes. I'm assuming you want something a little more detailed,
Yeah.
but at this point, we felt like this was more valuable for you
Yeah.
than getting into details of all kinds of numbers.
Can that wait till the August meeting to adopt?
I would say no. I think we all agree that both the city and the county will need a number.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, are they comfortable with our interim director working with the council and coming to an agreement, or will you need another meeting? But we know you've been talking about another meeting.
Yeah. Thoughts?
You know, until we go through contract negotiations, that's just going to be a big hit. So, I mean, the big, not hit, but variable that could change things.
Yeah.
So until we go through that, I'm thinking by the end of June, we should have something that we could discuss.
We'll be working to make sure that the county deadline of May 5th, we'll have that preliminary budget in the Dropbox for you. We'll make sure that it gets to the remainder of the council as well. And then I just assume we'll roll that in once we're finished with negotiations and come up with a final plan.
Okay.
Reasonable?
Yeah. So we'll plan on that. We'll plan on probably covering that in a special meeting or something to formally adopt.
We can have a budget meeting we do for everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Item 8, I'd like to have a motion to call us out to exec session for the purposes of and authorized by SDCL 1-25-2, 1, 3, and 4.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion by Karski and seconded by Sale. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. We'll head to the next room for exec session. And when we come back, we do got one other item we need to handle on the agenda.
We have to